Hi everyone, welcome to eLearnChat, where you always learn something new. We're joined today by my good friend coming to us from just outside London, Leslie Price. She's with www.learnappeal.com. Please visit the website. Harold, do you have the website?
No, wait.
We're going to show the website for Learn Appeal. It's a great project. If you don't know about it, go find out about it. Leslie's got some intro videos about what they're doing and how they're doing it. It's all about helping people who can't easily help themselves, keep them in their communities, helping their communities grow and get better. Education, that's the key. Great project. Leslie is the chief cook and bottle washer of that project. She works a lot on it, and it's good. Anyway, hi Leslie, how are you?
I'm very good, and I'm delighted that we're going to be introducing and talking to Richard Price this evening or this morning.
No relationship either.
No relationship. We were talking about that before the show. I'm actually by birth a MacDonald, so I am well and truly Scottish.
Yes.
We're going to be talking to Richard, and we're going to be talking to him about the work that he's doing in the National Health Service in the UK.
Yep.
But he is also a volunteer for Learn Appeal.
Learn Appeal. Yep. And also joining us today is Harold Muliati. He's going to be running the video switcher and mixer. And here we go. This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation at www.relate.com, your training and video partner. And we are back. And in that center position of power, as we like to call it, we've got Richard Price with us. Hi, Richard. How are you?
Hi, Rick. Great to be here. Thank you ever so much for having me today and inviting me.
Oh, our pleasure. And we got to meet in person in February this year at the Learning Technologies Conference. It was fun.
So I'm in London today, and that's where we first met, wasn't it, Rick?
Yes.
At the Learning Technologies exhibition. And we discovered quite quickly we had something in common through Leslie, that we're both involved with the Learn Appeal charity.
Yep, that's absolutely great. And so what do you do in the world of e-learning?
That it is.
Richard, I'm sorry, what do you do in the world of e-learning?
So I've been involved with e-learning for, probably about 15 years now. So I perhaps didn't have the most traditional path into the career. So I actually started off as a marine biologist. My undergraduate degree is in marine biology, and I spent my days looking down microscopes, looking at marine snails and all sorts of fascinating things like that. But I realised quite quickly that wasn't probably for me. So moved very quickly into other sectors. I've always had an interest in technology. I've always been wanting to get involved with that. So worked for a number of charity organisations where I did websites and things like that for them. And then moved into the world of learning technology, which is just an area that I find absolutely fascinating and a great deal of fun as well. So it's been great to be involved with that community over the past 10 or 15 years.
That's great. Isn't it amazing how few of us actually started in this field, but all sorts of different fields, and we wind up...
Me, what I speak to has a really unique story like that, and actually very few people actually start off in the discipline that they end up with.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I think that's also particularly true in learning technologies, e-learning. Because I was looking at something, a comment that somebody had made, Ewan Semple. I think you also met Ewan, Rick, at Learning Technologies.
I think so,
yeah. And Ewan was asked on Facebook, somebody had said to him, "And what do you do?" And he said, "It's just," he said, how do you actually explain it? And I remember when my children were young, because I've been involved in e-learning, since before the invention of the internet. And when my children were ever asked, at school, particularly at primary school, "What does your mother do?" "Oh, she plays on the computer all day."
And some things never change, right?
So things don't change. Yeah, that's right, Rick. So I was involved with what was called computer-based training when I first started out with this field, which was the precursor really to e-learning and to the sort of technology that we now see that are in use, not just in the health sector where I work, but across sort of the world of learning. So virtual reality, all of these things sort of all stemmed from these really sort of quite relatively simple in modern terms technologies that came out of computer-based training.
Yeah. Now you work with the healthcare system, correct?
Yes, so I work for the National Health Service, which is in the United Kingdom. It's usually one of the largest employers in the world. So we kind of we're quite proud of the fact that actually we're one of the bigger employers. So it usually varies. We were sort of number 3 or number 4. So it's usually we're competing with the US Army or the McDonald's or Walmart, usually at the top sort of number of employees, but we've got about 1.3 million people that we support. So the organisation I work for, we train those people that are working in healthcare all the way through from when they're undergraduates all the way through to when they retire. So we keep them abridged of all of their sort of technical skills and things like that. So and I guess I'm in a really privileged position. We get to work with some incredible clinicians that are really genuinely saving lives on a day-to-day basis, and we essentially operate as a research and development team, looking at new technologies that are coming out and looking at how we can implement those to improve the way that we train those healthcare professionals, whether they're doctors, nurses, paramedics, or everyone in between.
What are some of the trends you're seeing in e-learning, for example, in your job, in the kind of learners or users that you have? What's changing?
So I'm not a fan of labels. So I'm not a fan of the sort of term millennial or the term sort of baby boom or Generation X, but actually we are finding that the way people are learning depends a lot on their age to some extent. So there's expectations for the younger workforce coming in, that there's a lot more self-directed learning. So that's a huge trend we're having to adapt to. So moving from a sort of very quite formal educational process to looking at a lot more informal learning technologies that can support them with their education and training. So just in time, bite-sized learning, all of those kind of things, and a lot more personalized learning as well. So the biggest way to turn somebody off learning is to give them a one-size-fits-all training package.
Right.
So we're spending a lot of time at the moment exploring the technologies that are out there that allow us to adapt the learning to the individual. So that could be making it more difficult or more easy depending on how they're coping with that. So not just in a sort of e-learning context, but also looking at simulation and all of those technologies out there as well.
Well, it's interesting because there's a thing that people don't talk about too much, and that's generational learning, if you will, like you just talked about, where the boomers like to read. They tend to be readers more than other things. They don't care. We've had more people in courses that we've developed say, "I don't want audio." And we go, "But audio helps. Doesn't help me any. I don't want audio." and you're trying to get them to get audio for other people, but they're like, "No, I just don't care. They need to read." But not everybody reads well, and we're finding the Xers were okay with kind of both. And the millennials prefer not reading; they prefer the audio more. So it's sort of interesting. That's just what we're finding in just courses that we build for people, what people like and what they.
It's not as black and white as that. I think.
No, it isn't. Yeah.
Absolutely. There are sort of trends along those lines, but everybody's different, and I think that's where we're looking at looking at different modalities of learning or methods of learning and looking at how we can improve that and make that accessible to everyone. I think the most amazing thing about technology that I've always found is if you have a building that's not accessible and somebody's got a physical impairment, you have to put a ramp in, you have to do sort of reverse engineering to make that building accessible. But with technology, we've got this amazing opportunity to make it accessible for absolutely everyone, whatever their disability or their ability. We all have disabilities, whether we acknowledge it or not. I mean, I need glasses. I'm too vain to get a pair, but there will come a time very soon when I need glasses. And actually, that's a physical impairment. So I need to make the font size bigger on the screen, for example, and things like that. But we can do that with technology, and I think that's incredible. So we can tailor to different, I don't want to call them learning styles, because that's obviously not, there's no such thing as learning styles as we know. But we can accommodate different sort of ways that people prefer to learn. So if somebody wants to have audio, they can have audio, but they have the option to switch that off and things. So we can accommodate lots of different modalities, and I think that's really exciting, and that's the opportunities the technology gives us that perhaps you can't do in a classroom, for example.
That's true.
So Richard, with the learning that you do, I know in the NHS, well, I don't know exactly, but how do people access the learning? Can they access it using their own devices? Do you have open systems, or because it's NHS, do the systems have to be closed down because of security and networking issues?
I think it's a combination of all of those different things. So that's a really hard question to answer because the organisation, although it's one organisation, is quite fragmented in terms of the way it's structured. So there's a lot of pockets of really good practice, and there are a lot of different learning management systems out there. I was at a conference a couple of days ago, the Learning Live conference in London, and somebody was talking about the average number of learning systems within an organisation is 11. And I thought, do you know what? Actually, I feel a bit better about that because we have more than that probably, but that's just the size of our organisation. But we're talking about big supermarkets here. We're talking about other sorts of organisations that have exactly the same challenges. So yeah, security is obviously an issue, and a lot of the content is sort of firewall behind that. But actually, what we're trying to do now is move towards a method where we can encourage people to embrace learning and take joy from learning. That's always been my sort of ethos. I think, again, I really want people to love learning as much as I do, and not think of it as a separate thing, have it as part of their daily routine. So whether that's via MOOCs or whether that's via sort of bite-sized YouTube videos and things like that, it's all on offer. And actually, I think that's really important. That actually, just because we have a learning management system that has some sort of curated content on it and things like that, doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities to find learning elsewhere.
So do you also encourage people to share? So in terms of peer-to-peer, because I mean, my niece is actually a paramedic. She works in Birmingham, and she's a paramedic there, and she's got various degrees and all sorts. So she's a very well qualified paramedic, and I can when you're working with paramedics, how do you cope with them being on the road, for example, the whole time?
So I had the great privilege actually of working for the ambulance service for 10 years, I think it was. It was a long time. So I worked with some incredible paramedics, and I always say you see the best in people and the worst in people at the same time. It's an incredible profession, but they are a very mobile workforce, as you might expect. So and they're not constantly on call, so they're not constantly going to the next emergency. They have pockets of time when they're waiting for an emergency to come in, so they might be sat in a lay-by road in their ambulance. So mobile learning is really important for that audience. So one of the programs we've worked on is a paramedic training program, so that they can access that learning from their personal device, their smartphone, and they can do sort of 2-3 minute piece of learning. And then when the next job comes in, they can disconnect from that, and it remembers their progress and things. So standard sort of SCORM functionality, but actually really powerful for that audience that really need access to just-in-time rapid e-learning, and in a position that is quite awkward sometimes, quite difficult to access.
Now, with the number of users you have, what do you find is probably the biggest challenge that you face?
So we have a massive workforce, as I said, so 1.3 million, which is just huge. If I think about it too much, I get quite scared, and I think there's no way we can train that many people, but we do. That's what we're here for. We train these massive numbers of people all day, every day. So the challenge is consistency and scalability. So I think if you think about McDonald's, for example, the cheeseburger that you can buy in London is the same one that you can buy in Los Angeles, and right. It's the same one that you can buy in any other part of the country in the world, which is because they've standardized all their training. But heart surgery, tracheostomy care, wound care, these things aren't as simple as creating a burger. So actually you have to have a lot more sort of tailored content. So the biggest challenge we have is sort of delivering that content to that massive audience, but also making sure that it's relevant for that whole audience. And it's some of it is very specialized content. So we have a catalog of 12,000 hours of learning. Some of that content is really quite sort of basic stuff. So it might be compliance training like fire safety and things like that. And that doesn't vary too much throughout the NHS, throughout the organisation. But like I say, there are local procedures for a lot of these different things. So a fire on the back of an ambulance, for example, is very different from a fire within a hospital ward. Cardiac surgery in one end of the country might be very different from cardiac surgery in another part, because, like I say, there are sort of regional differences and local differences at different hospitals, just because of different practices and things like that. So the big challenge we have, really, to answer your question, is trying to tailor it for those different audiences, and that's something we continuously work with all of the different organisations that make up the NHS to make sure that this is relevant for them.
That's excuse me. That's absolutely interesting. It's a good challenge because it keeps you busy, keeps you always learning and on your toes. Which would you say are the main authoring tools you use to develop training?
So the one that I personally use when I'm developing learning is a product called Lectora. That's used by a company called Trivantis, who are based in Florida. So I love that tool. It's so easy, but obviously I'm not on commission with those guys, so we use a whole range of different tools out there. So there's use of Captivate, for example, for sort of IT training and things like that. But we also use tools like increasingly Adapt, which is a product that produces, so you might not come across that, it's produced by a company in Northern Ireland who have created a product that creates responsive templates and responsive designs. It's designed perfectly to fit on one of these devices, so nothing out of the ordinary, really. So these are sort of the tools we're starting to use. Increasingly, we're starting to look at how we can use virtual reality to train doctors, nurses, paramedics. So we're having to look at authoring tools to do that. I've played around with technologies that are open source, like A-Frame, for example, which is a great open source JavaScript framework if you're into that sort of thing. But it's really hard to do anything with, because you need to know the X, Y, and the Z coordinates of all those things. So again, we're looking to tools that are out there that potentially deliver that in the future, that make that a lot easier. So one of the tools, again, from the company Trivantis that we're working with, is called Scenario VR. And that's like a drag and drop interface that creates a 360 degree video that has hotspots and things on it. So I really like that at the moment. But like I say, it varies considerably just because of the diversity of the content that we've got. So although we can't standardize on one tool, because you can't do everything with one tool, so you have to try what all the different tools are out there.
Yeah, I know all those tools. I was actually on the advisory board for Trivantis and the advisory board for Captivate, so I've been on both of those, and it's good. And Scenario is interesting. That Scenario VR came out, and then I love watching the e-learning wars between the authoring tools. But then shortly thereafter, Captivate came out with a similar version of like a Scenario VR, but it was included as part of Captivate for free. And I went, ooh, that was pretty interesting. It's not quite as robust, but it's not bad.
Yeah, so this is the challenge. I think you've hit the nail on the head, really, with learning technology in general. Things are changing so quickly. I didn't even know about that tool you just talked about. So these are things that it's really hard to keep up with the latest technologies coming out, and how you adapt to make use of the best technology that's available at the time.
That's it.
Before the program, Richard, you shared with us a report that you'd been working on that sounded really interesting, and I just wondered if you would like to tell us a little bit more about that.
So there's a report by a guy that we actually commissioned this from. So the Secretary of State for Health in the United Kingdom, Matt Hancock, commissioned this from a US professor, US cardiac surgeon called Professor Eric Topol. Topol, we call him on this side of the Atlantic. Just the differences in the accent, I guess. But this is a really exciting report, and it looks at the future of healthcare, essentially. So we know that healthcare is changing technology is coming out there, and this report summarises basically the three sort of key areas that we're looking at. So there's genomic medicine, which is just the most incredible thing. Genomic medicine is where they map the human genome.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mentioned right at the start of the call, I used to be a biologist, so this was science fiction when I started doing my undergraduate degree in biology. These things didn't exist, so they can now map the human genome in 20 minutes. This wasn't even possible 10 years ago. So from that, they can then look at personalised medicine. They can use artificial intelligence to start exploring those things. The cost of sort of consumer devices is coming down. If you flip to the next slide, I'll give you an example of that. So the device on the screen now, it plugs into your smartphone, and it's a peak flow meter. So it measures the sort of your breathing rate. So you measure this every minute or every few minutes, and it sends that data to your general practitioner back in the clinic, and they can look at patterns using artificial intelligence that look at how differences, how you compare to other members of the population that have got the same condition as you, and they can alert you if there's a problem, so that you know in advance. And what's the most amazing thing is, you never have to see a clinician necessarily to use these devices. These cost about £35, which is about $40. So these are almost throwaway items at that price, considering the cost of an appointment with a GP. So these are sort of completely different models of delivering healthcare. We've got robotics coming out, and this is what the report sort of talks about, these sort of major changes that are happening within healthcare. But the challenge we've got is obviously we have to keep the workforce trained up. So the workforce maybe have never come across some of these technologies. We have people that are going to be working together with us for the next 40 years that have just graduated as a junior doctor, for example. So how do we keep their skills up so that we can support them and get them to deliver the best possible patient care over the next 40 years of their career? Because we want to have the best patient outcomes and things. So one of the things we're looking at is a digital capability framework. So we looked at digital literacy, which is a huge challenge. So the literacies that you and I might need are very different from those which a clinician might need, but there are some common themes. So we looked at the 6 sort of common themes. So the obvious one is sort of safety and security. So how do you make sure that somebody stays safe online? How do you protect patient data and things like that? These are common challenges, but not everybody has grown up with the technology and has been brought up with the technology. So we need to keep everybody's skills up with that. So that's really what this framework's all about. So we're living in a really exciting time in terms of the changes that are happening in medicine, but we need to know that those 1.3 million members of staff are sufficiently skilled to be able to adapt to those changes. And when I say adapt, I guess I'm not talking about necessarily training people how to do this. It's about changing people's perceptions, getting over some of those fears, for example. So we know that radiography, for example, is a discipline that artificial intelligence is making some huge leaps in that. So we know that an artificial intelligence can analyse an image and tell you if you've got cancer far better than a human can. So there's a whole career there that needs to look at how they adapt. But think about it from a patient point of view. Do you want to be told by an artificial intelligence that you've got or by a computer that you've got cancer, or do you want somebody that's a clinician that's trained and skilled in that area to be able to interpret that and sit down with you and say, this is the prognosis, those kind of things. So these are a different skill set to what we're currently working towards. So these are some big challenges that we're having to address in the healthcare workforce. And this is the same globally. This isn't just the same in the UK. We're working across the world to try and address these issues with the World Health Organization and other sort of organizations like that, to try and address these. These are massive challenges, fundamental challenges to the way that we're delivering healthcare, but making it more equitable, making it more fair, and using the technology to support our amazing workforce. And I've had the great privilege of working with these people for a long time, working with these incredible healthcare professionals to try and make sure that they can deliver the best possible care to the patients.
You've blown my brain, Richard. You've blown my mind. It just I can't. How many of you are in the team that are supporting 1.3 million people?
We're a really tiny team, but it's honestly, I know I'm sort of gushing a little bit about this, but it's a real privilege to be in the position that we are, that we can work with these incredible people and help them to develop their learning, their skills. So yeah, like I say, we're a really small team, but we're making some great leaps. And like I say, the fun bit for me is coming into work and being able to play with all the gadgets as well. So we've got a pair of Google glasses, for example, that we can play with, and we're doing some amazing stuff with mentoring through Google Glass. So these glasses, you put them on, you wear them, and our colleagues can observe what their peers are doing, for example, and look at how a patient is receiving the news that they're receiving, for example. We can also flash messages up on the screen and say, actually, that drug's not compatible with what you're prescribing, for example. We're playing with Microsoft HoloLens, that's another one. Looking at how we can use that to train a big group of people. So these things, that Microsoft HoloLens overlays on the top of a screen a transparent image of a person, for example, and we can look at how that's being used to. We can all look at that and observe what's happening, and we can make the patient more sick, or we can make them less sick, depending on how the group is doing with that. So I guess taking lessons a lot from the airline industry, from the simulation industry, that sort of evolved with that. So again, like I say, a real privilege to be working on these incredible projects.
It actually sounds like a lot of fun.
It is. There are days, I shouldn't say this in case my boss is watching, but there are days I can't believe I come into work and they actually pay me for doing this.
But that's the beauty. When you enjoy what you're doing, you're not working, you're playing, you're having a good time. And that's the beauty when you find something you like doing. And that's a shame that so many people don't find things they like to do and they go through life just unhappy. And you go, that's a choice. You could do something you like. But it's just sort of interesting.
It's like when Richard did his first course for LearnAppeal. He did one on domestic rainwater collection, how you collect rainwater. And I said, Richard, why on earth have you picked something like this? He said, I just thought it would be really interesting. And then he was struggling to find photographs online. So we actually went out and bought a whole load of kit, built it all for himself, took the photographs, and then said, oh, it was great, because see, when there was problems with drought over the summer, I was sorted.
Absolutely. I mean, these are fundamental challenges, and I've been so grateful to work with you, Leslie, on the LearnAppeal stuff, because we really are changing the world. And I know that's sort of a bit of a cliche, and we talk about that a lot, but actually we are taking the LearnAppeal capsule to communities in Africa that really, these are fundamental skills. These are not the sort of things I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. We're looking at how we, I don't know, clean wounds, for example. We're producing e-learning on those kind of subjects. These are not the sort of topics that we're covering with LearnAppeal. These are things we're having to go right back to basics and collect rainwater. So there's some fantastic charities in the UK that are doing some stuff with communities all over the world, where there are people literally in drought poverty and not able to have clean drinking water and things like that. So I've got this amazing sponsored toilet. So there's a company called a charity called Toilet Twinning, so they can twin your toilet. So again, this is a subject that's really close to my heart. How we make sort of clean drinking water accessible to communities all over the world, and that's really what motivated me to support Leslie with the work of LearnAppeal and to produce a course on this. But like Leslie said, I'm sorry I haven't got a photo to show you really, but my wife was delighted as I was constructing bits of drain pipe and plastic water butts in the back garden. But this thing works. It collects rainwater, and I can water the garden all summer long now if I need to.
Yeah, but I can see the link between, what you were, because what you did was something that was, you were trying to make something to which other people might find difficult to do, and you were trying to make it simple and easier. And I can also see the link there with your health service work, that what you're trying to do is make something that to a lot of people might seem very complex you know, and you're trying to find the easiest way possible to get that message across so that they learn from it, take it in, and hopefully it changes their practice to the benefit of both the individuals who are giving the care and those who are receiving it.
Absolutely, and I think the bit we haven't really talked about today has been about patient education as well. So we've got access to Dr. Google now, so we can all check our symptoms online, and actually sometimes we scare ourselves unnecessarily. So some of what we're doing is working with clinicians actually to educate the patients on how on the symptoms they have probably are just something very mundane rather than cancer or something like that.
Right.
Reassuring people like that. So working with public health and other parts of the healthcare system to make sure that we're sort of all joined up.
Well, Richard, it's been a pleasure having you on. We'd love to have you on again because I think we're just touching the tip of the iceberg with what you do and what you know and what's going on. Because with that many people to train, that I think you're probably short of, like you said, military or something. You've probably been one of the people that's worked with a huge number of people to train. Most of the people we talk to are training thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, but nobody's been at the scale you have, except maybe military. So it's fun. It's fun to hear what an organization like the National Health Service is doing and how they're doing it. I think it's fascinating. So we'd love you to come back on and share some more and talk a little bit about, like you said, the patient outreach part of it, because that's so important.
Yeah, the outpatient stuff would be really interesting to follow up on. Very interesting, because as you know, that's one of the things that we try to do with the Learn Appeal capsule. And because people's health is actually one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, improving people's
health, universal health for all.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway,
So
it's been lovely.
Delighted to come back. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, thanks for coming, Richard. We appreciate it. It was good meeting you back in February, and look forward to another meet one day. And if you ever come out towards the States, let us know, especially places like DevLearn or something else. Those are fun. You get to see a lot of tools there, though you get to see them at Learning Tech too. So again, thanks for joining us. And for all you people in the chat room, we'll put information below on what Richard does. And if people want to get a hold of you, how can they contact you?
So they can contact me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm at Richard Price UK.
Okay, we'll put your LinkedIn information below too. So
Great.
that sounds good. So I appreciate you coming on. Leslie, till next week, keep busy with what you're doing. I know you got a busy life going on right now.
Oh, and very, very busy.
Yeah, and we'll see you guys next week on eLearnChat. Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.